Now, a couple things I want to talk about. I guess it's going to be a while before people get notifications that this stream is live. Couple things I want to talk about here. First of all, Eubank Jr. lost, obviously. He was outclassed by George Groves. But I've seen a lot of people say that Eubank Jr. is not world class. And even today I saw somebody say that Hughie Fury is not world class, right? Now people throw around this term world class willy-nilly without really defining what world class actually means. What do people mean by world class when they say world class? Because if world class just means you're ranked in the top 10 of any sanctioning body, or you've beaten somebody in the top 10, then you're world class. Because like in this video here, Peter Fury is saying that Eubank Jr. is world class. So what's his definition of world class? Ranked in the top 10, like able to beat people in the top 10? Eubank Jr. has done that. He beat Avni Yildirim, who was ranked in the top 10 of at least one sanctioning body. I think more than one sanctioning body at the time Eubank Jr. beat him. So he's beating people in the top 10 at super middle, and he's beating people in the top 10 at middleweight. So wouldn't that make him world class? One of the top 10 in the world? Like, people don't really seem to define what they mean by world class. So yeah, not sure what's going not sure why there's only one person in the chat. This is very strange. 4 people watching. So I don't know what is going on with this particular stream. Why nobody's been notified apart from like one person. For Fox Aikman, what's good, bro? What's good? What's good? Couple other things I want to talk about. Deontay Wilder versus Luis Ortiz. You've got Peter Fury in this video right here, and David Haye in this interview here, both saying that they expect Deontay Wilder to deal with Luis Ortiz. And Peter said it in several interviews recently, but they're both saying they expect Deontay Wilder to deal with Luis Ortiz with relative ease. Neither one of them seems to be giving Luis Ortiz much of a shot at beating Deontay Wilder. They're quite dismissive of Ortiz's chances. So I want to get people's take on that. What do you think of Peter Fury and Haye? And there are other people as well, major figures within boxing, who are saying the same thing. They're kind of dismissing Luis Ortiz's chances against Wilder. They say, Ortiz is too old, he's slow. You know, David Haye is saying that Wilder's going to do a similar job on Ortiz that he did to Berman Stavern. He just might take a couple extra rounds. That's what Haye's saying in this particular interview. And also the whole Joyce Derek Chisora situation. Joyce wants the Chisora fight. David Haye says that Joyce has been offered, he's improved the offer, because he offered him 60 grand or 80 grand depending on who you believe previously. But now he says he's made Derek Chisora an offer to fight Joyce, which is equal to the money that he got for his last fight against Caballel for the European title. Now, my point of view is that's a great offer. Why? Because how many people would get that kind of money, whatever it is? I mean, how many people would even get 80 grand to face a guy who's 2-0? Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, Chisora is getting offered 80 grand to fight a guy who's 2-0. And that's what he was being offered. Haye says he's increased the offer now, or improved it, and he's willing to offer to Chisora the same as he got against Caballel. And Chisora's coming off a loss. So you're coming off a loss, you're offered a fight against a 2-0 prospect for, you know, upwards of 80 grand. You're trying to tell me that's not a good offer for somebody like Chisora, who's got loads of losses on his record now, and he's coming off a loss? Like, that's a good offer. But I have a feeling Chisora's not going to take it. And it's also on a big card. It's on the undercard of David Haye, Bellew the rematch. So, you know, I think it's a good offer. Yeah, I guess people ain't gonna see this live. I did something slightly different when I started this chat, because I wasn't sure if my streaming software would fail me again, but I've updated it today. I updated it to the latest version and it seems to be okay. So what I did, just in case, was I started the live stream and put it on private, and I kept it on private for a number of minutes until it was clear that it weren't gonna cut off, and then yeah. So what else was I saying here? Yeah, I don't think Derek Chisora is gonna take this fight. I don't think he's gonna take the Joyce fight. That's just what I feel in my bones. And the reason he's not gonna take it is because he knows that it's a very, very high possibility that he could lose the fight. In fact, I expect him to lose if the fight happens. I know a lot of people don't rate Joyce and they say he's slow and clumsy and all that kind of stuff, and I agree with all that. Joyce does look incredibly slow, incredibly clumsy, incredibly novicey, but this is a man who made it to the highest levels in the amateur game, and he was also in the World Series of Boxing fighting the very, very highest level fighters, and he had decent success in the amateurs as an international amateur. So even though his style is ugly as hell, one of the ugliest styles I've ever seen in boxing, somehow he's effective with it. The results speak for themselves. And I'm going to go with the results. I think Joyce will beat Derek Chisora if they fight on the undercard of Haye Bellew 2. I think Joyce will win. So those are my views. Alright, a couple more people joining the stream. Not many people, but it's alright. It's alright, it's okay. Alright, let's get to some of the comments here. For Fox, Aikman says, I said it before and I'll say it again, when Wilder beats Ortiz and probably makes him quit, people will say Ortiz was old, the drug test drained him. Yeah, that's what they're gonna say. That's what they're gonna say. DW International says, why is the stream so late on a work night? Well, depends where you are in the world. Depends where you are in the world. We're not all in the same time zone, so some places it's going to be later than others. And I try and do these streams whenever I can, so I can't always do them at optimum times. I just do them when I can, and obviously it's always saved to YouTube so you can watch it afterwards if you don't catch it live. Yeah, David Haye hasn't disclosed exactly how much they're offering Chisora, but he says it's the same as he was offered for the Caballero, or the same as he got for the Caballero fight, for his last fight. So yeah, you can't really say fairer than that. A fight against a novice, a 2-0 novice, for the same money as he got for fighting for the European title. Yeah, big up Cass from Miami. Big up Cass. Fox says, I want someone to end Joyce. Don't want to see him fight, man. It's horrible. Nice guy, but his style looks like he just started boxing. Yeah, that's the incredible thing about Joyce, is he looks so novicey. You would never imagine, if you'd never heard of Joyce before and you just watched one of his fights, you would think that this is a guy who just started boxing last week. That's how novicey he looks. But somehow this guy's been a very successful international amateur. So he's clearly doing something right. I can't really figure out how he makes his style work, but as I say, the results speak for themselves. Yeah, big up Yardie Boxing. As you see, like, some people are in different parts of the world, so the timing is good for them. Jep Fresh says, your views on the World Boxing Super Series on Saturday. Do you mean the one that is to come this Saturday, or the one that is just gone last Saturday? For Fox Aikman says, when you look at Joyce, I can see it now. When he loses, he's going to take an absolute pasting. I can just tell. He beat Yoka in the Olympic finals though, blatantly. Don't know, man. Joyce is an enigma to me. I don't know why he's been successful looking as novice-y as he is, but he has been. So I don't know. It's an enigma, but it seems to work for him. Joyce has been boxing for a long time. I know he did take up boxing fairly late. I think he was in his late teens when he took up boxing. You know, anybody can correct me if I'm wrong, but he's been an international amateur for many years. For many years. He's got extensive amateur experience for, you know, over a decade. Furman's got 2 mandatories. Yeah, he's got the Porter mandatory, and he's also got Danny Garcia mandatory. Michael Stannis says, loving the Patreon Q&As. Glad you're enjoying them, bro. Chip Body time. Oh yeah, sorry, to get back to this Saturday. I have never seen the guy that Callum Smith is going to fight, his replacement. It's hard to do a prediction on a guy you've never seen. But, you know, the guy is crossing over from kickboxing, and apparently he still boxes in kickboxing. So one would assume that Callum Smith should be able to destroy this guy with relative ease and march on into the final against whoever it's going to be, whether it's going to be George Groves or a replacement. There is a theory out there, and it's only a theory. I can't say the theory is true, but there's a theory out there that there's some type of collusion going on with Jürgen Brähmer and the Chiefs at the World Boxing Super Series. And the theory is that they have told Brähmer to pull out with an illness or something like that, because they plan on replacing Groves in the final with Brähmer, because Groves is not going to be recovered from his injury. That is the theory which is out there. I don't know whether it's true or not, but that's a theory that I've seen some people talking about. For Fox Aikman says, look at B-Hop and Tevin Farmer though. Late starters and both highly skilled. Yeah, you can be highly skilled and be a late starter. Yeah, you can get skills and whatnot. Joyce was a late starter, but he's had lots of experience in the amateurs. Joyce was amateur for longer than Anthony Joshua. Yeah, he's got more amateur experience than Anthony Joshua, and he was in the World Series of Boxing, which is like a semi-pro league, I guess you would call it. So he's got loads of experience. I just can't understand why he looks so novice-y. It's weird, but that's how it is. James Erickson says, how would Vitaly Klitschko do today? In his prime, he'd do very well. Very well. He'd probably be the best around today, Vitaly Klitschko. I don't think it'll be that easy for him, because other than Lennox Lewis, Vitaly Klitschko never really was in there with anyone of a decent size who had ability. So I'm not saying the likes of Joshua and Parker would be easy. I think they would be among his toughest fights, but you'd have to imagine Vitaly Klitschko would do pretty well right now if he was in his prime. Yeah, big up Darren. TG says, I won't deem it as a legitimate win if Callum Smith wins the tournament and doesn't beat Groves. Yeah, I think a lot of people share the same views on that. Faraz says, Hatman, always find your insight very enlightening and knowledgeable. Thanks, been listening to your vids for about a year now. Shout me out if you see this. Hussein from Byfleet. So shout out to Hussein from Byfleet. Thank you for locking in. TG says, Sergio Martinez first put on a pair of gloves at 20 and he's a legend. Yeah, Martinez was actually a football player or something like that. Yeah, I think he was a football player, but he messed up his knees playing football, so he chose another sport, took up boxing, and became very successful in boxing. Michael Stannis says, surely the series needs Smith Groves final to actually make it financially viable. I think they'll push the final back to recoup the money spent. Yeah, that seems to be the logical thing to do, to push it back. So I don't know, we'll see. TG says Usyk better stay away from heavyweight. Yeah, I mean he found it difficult against Breedis, that's for sure. He found it difficult, but Breedis is very good. He impressed me against Usyk, definitely. Jep Fresh says BGS to Matchroom, what's your thoughts? I've heard he has one more fight with Warren. I'll be surprised if he goes to Matchroom, to be honest. I know Eddie Hearn was making him a pitch in that recent interview and telling him you ain't earning the kind of money that Danny Jacobs is earning and all this kind of business. So that's clearly what Eddie Hearn has in mind. I mean, maybe it'd be a good idea for Billy Joe, but him leaving Warren, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if he'll do that, because he does seem to be one of these loyal characters, and Warren brought him through from the amateurs, you know, from when he turned pro. He's been with Warren, and yeah, but you never know. You never know. TG says Martinez was a cyclist and a footballer. Darren in Stone says, what do you think of Joshua potentially fighting Big Baby Miller instead of going straight for Wilder? Does this make more financial sense? Well, I've seen a lot of the Americans saying that this is a duck by Anthony Joshua. He's ducking Wilder, this, that, and the other. What it seems to be is that Wilder wants a 2-fight deal, right? And he wants one of the fights to be in the United States. He's not willing to fight Joshua in a one-off contest in the UK. That's what it appears to be to me. So Eddie Hearn's thinking, okay, if you're not willing to fight Joshua in a one-off deal in the UK, and you want a 2-fight deal where we do one fight in the UK and the other fight in the States, then we have to build up a potential fight between Wilder and Joshua in the States, because right now it's not pay-per-view in the States. So we're going to have to build it up in the States to the point where it would be pay-per-view. So that's why I think he's looking at Jarrell Miller, because Miller talks a lot, and he's somebody that will become popular, I think, among the youth culture in the United States, because he talks a lot. He's a trash talker, very, you know, outspoken, funny kind of character. So they'll put him on shows like The Breakfast Club and, you know, DJ Sway in the morning and all that kind of stuff. All these popular American culture, you know, American pop culture, hip hop culture type outlets, and I can see him being on those building up to the Joshua fight. And Miller now is getting a lot more fan recognition in his hometown of New York because he's fighting at the Barclays Center now a lot. So they're building him up at the Barclays Center along with Danny Jacobs. He's always in these double headers now with Danny Jacobs. This is a good move by Eddie Hearn to build up Jarrell Miller and build up his visibility in the United States. Then when they can get it to a certain point, put him in there with Joshua in the States. If Joshua does a job on Miller after Miller's been trash talking him and, you know, been all over the youth media in the United States, and then Joshua destroys him, that will then make the United States hungry for somebody to take Joshua out, and that of course would be Deontay Wilder. That's what they'd be hoping. So from a strategic point of view, I can see what Eddie Hearn is doing. And again, since Wilder seems unwilling to take on Joshua in a one-off fight in the UK, because he's talking about, you know, 50-50 and all this type of business, which is not realistic at this point. Really, is it? Wilder don't even make a fraction of what Joshua makes per fight. So asking for 50-50, it's just not realistic. So Eddie Hearn is trying to find a way to do the Wilder fight, and he's trying to compromise and say, okay, we'll do the 2-fight deal, but that means I'm gonna have to build Joshua up in the United States more to make Wilder Joshua in the US pay-per-view worthy or pay-per-view viable. So I think that's what it is. Alright, let me get back to some of the comments here. TG says they're going to have Browne versus Smith in Germany. Watch. They're going to violate Groves, but at least Groves won't be stripped. So TG thinks they're going to do what some people are suggesting and have Browne Smith as the final in Germany. Wouldn't surprise me. Wouldn't surprise me, to be honest. I'm not saying it's true, but it wouldn't surprise me. Chip Body Time says, what did you make on what Prince Nassim said about Eubank Jr.? I thought it was hilarious. It was funny. I don't necessarily agree with him, but that's his opinion. So I didn't really have too much of a problem with what Prince Nassim said. I don't agree with it, but it's his right to have his view, and that's what his view is. His view is he thinks Junior should retire because he just don't have it. So Silo mixing and mastering, what's good? Again, apologies as always if I can't get to everybody's comments, because there is quite a lot coming through now. Cheese says, are you aware that Nike Holkin, or however you pronounce his name, is a former Glory kickboxing champion? Not saying he's going to beat Smith, but just thought you should know. Yeah, I'm aware that he was high up in kickboxing and he was well renowned and good. I'm aware of that. Yeah. DW International says, apparently Kell Brook feels backstabbed by Eddie about Amir Khan. Yeah, I could see that when he did an interview talking about Khan signing to Matchroom, that he said his first thought when he heard that Khan signed to Matchroom was, what happened, Eddie? I thought you was my boy. So yeah, Kell Brook now realizes that Eddie Hearn's all about the money. Yeah. Big up Mo. He says, what fights would you like to see in 2018? Any weight class? I'd like to see all the heavyweight unifications, Joshua Parker, and big up Joshua and Parker, by the way, for unifying, because they ain't wasted any time when it comes to unifications, have they? Joshua was straight in there. Well, especially Parker more than Joshua, but still, Joshua unified by beating Klitschko. Then he's fought Takam, and now he's straight back in another unification. So big up Joshua for doing that, and big up Parker. Parker, from as soon as he got his belt, he's been looking to make the biggest fights. So big up Parker, man. But yeah, the heavyweight unifications I want to see. What else would I like to see? I'd like to see Keith Thurman versus Spence, and I'd like to see Terence Crawford versus Thurman or Spence. Them three guys fighting each other in any combination, I'd like to see. Yeah. And as I say, the heavyweight unifications, Wilder, Joshua. I'd like to see Jerome Miller versus Joshua. I think it's a fun fight. I'm looking forward to Whyte versus Browne. What other fights? I'd like to see Jamal Charlo take on the winner of the Golovkin-Canelo rematch. I'd like to see that. I'd like to see Anthony Yarde actually fight somebody decent. Yardy Boxing Talk says Wilder versus Ortiz may just be another upset. I think Wilder overlooking Ortiz. And he's talking about Joshua every chance he gets. It's not going to be a good look for him if he loses. It won't be a good look for him if he loses. But as I was saying earlier in the stream, you got people like David Haye. If I can get it up here. Yeah, David Haye in this video and Peter Fury in this video, both of them are saying that they think Wilder is going to beat Ortiz with relative ease. Neither one of them is giving Ortiz much of a chance. They're both actually very dismissive of Ortiz's chances of winning the fight, which to me I thought was interesting. I definitely think Wilder is going to win. I think it's, in my head, at least 60-40 in Wilder's favor. I looked at Ortiz's last fight and I wasn't impressed. I saw a lot of holes in his defense and he just looked very slow. And David Haye made a good point actually. David Haye said Ortiz has been popped for PEDs a few times now, and when he got popped for PEDs it was against when he was fighting journeyman. So if you are taking PEDs, if you think you need PEDs to perform against journeyman, then that's not a good sign. And Haye is also saying that Ortiz is way older than 37 or 38. So, you know, these guys have got their reasons, but as I say, if you go watch them two videos there, Haye and Peter Fury, they're both very dismissive of Ortiz's chances. They both think Wilder's going to do a job on him. So it's worth considering. And I do think Wilder's going to win. I'm not as adamant as they are that he's going to do a job and just blast Ortiz out. He might do, but I think Wilder's going to win. I do think Wilder's going to win. I'm fairly confident Wilder will win. Like at least 60-40 in my head that Wilder will do it. Yeah, Spence versus Crawford will be epic. Simo says, is Parker going to do the hacker? I hope so. I hope so. It'll be entertaining, man. Silo Mixing and Mastering says, I think Crawford beats Spence. He has the style to beat Spence as long as he doesn't do what Peterson did and stupidly trade in the pocket with Spence. Suicide. Now I think Crawford is a lot smarter than that, and he's a lot more gifted than Peterson as well. Charlie Max says, I think it's very suspect that Bramer pulled out with days to go. He was on his Instagram at a football match when he was meant to be in bed. I think Sauerland are planning something. Yeah, a lot of people have been saying this, so we'll see. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. TMCA player says, Hatman, what are your thoughts on the Garcia-Rios fight? I didn't watch it. I only watched the knockout, and I mean the knockout was what you expected, wasn't it? Rios is way over the hill, and stylistically Garcia likes people who come at him like that. So there's only ever going to be one winner, and that's why I didn't even bother watching it, because I knew what to expect. I've got no desire to see Rios fight anybody, never mind Danny Garcia. So I did see the KO, but I didn't bother watching the whole thing. Big up Amran. If David Haye wins against Bellew, what do you think his next move will be? I think it depends on how Haye looks against Bellew. If he wipes Bellew out, then he's going to call out Joshua, surely. That's what he's going to do. He's going to call out one of the champions. David Haye has never been a guy who's into fighting eliminators and fighting contenders. He's not into that. David Haye is all about going straight for the champions. So surely, especially at this late stage of his career, if he beats Bellew and does so impressively, he's going to be calling out one of the champions. That's what he's surely going to do. He might even try and go for the winner of... Nah, that's a bit long. I was going to say he might try to go for the winner of Okendo versus Char, but nah, that's a regular title, and there's no guarantee that getting a regular title would get him a shot at Joshua or, you know, Parker anytime soon. So now he'll probably just call out Joshua. And what do you guys think as well about the David Haye Bellew rematch? Because I'm pretty sure we all agree, or most of us agree, 99.9% of people agree, that a prime David Haye would definitely beat Tony Bellew. I'm sure we all agree on that, right? Or most of us. David Haye 100% beats Bellew. But we don't have David Haye 100%, and we'll never see David Haye 100% again. So therefore, what percentage does David Haye need to be at in order to beat Bellew? Because we know he's not going to be 100%. What was he last time? Maybe 50%? 40%? So what percent does he need to be able to beat Bellew in this rematch? And is it attainable? What do you guys think? Michael Stennis says, thoughts on Salvador Sanchez. Obviously died young, but already had a great CV, but could have achieved so much more. Yeah, it was sad. Sanchez is one of those guys who was caught up in the streets, and very talented, big puncher, aggressive guy, and he looked destined for great things, but yeah, the streets sucked him in, and it was what it was, a tragic story. One sec, people. Oh, my bad. Ward will fight Bellew. I think Haye, TG says I think Haye was at 35 to 45%. Sorry, I'm I'm mixed up in my head at the moment. I wasn't thinking about Salvador Sanchez. I was thinking about Edwin Valero. Sorry. Valero is the guy who got caught up in the streets. No, Salvador Sanchez was a guy from back in the days, who many regard as the best Mexican fighter of all time, who didn't box in a typical Mexican style, and indeed committed suicide. Sorry, I was in my head I was getting Valero mixed up with Sanchez. Yeah, Sanchez was a very good fighter. A lot of people believe the best Mexican fighter of all time, and you know, unlike a lot of Mexicans, he wasn't coming forward and fighting with his face, but he was more of a stylist, more of a boxer puncher. So yeah, Salvador Sanchez, my apologies, a very good fighter. But Valero was also a very good fighter. Valero was Venezuelan, I believe, or somewhere in South America. Sanchez was Mexican. Donovan Chilton says, how old do you think Ortiz really is? My guess is 43, 44. Yeah, maybe around there. Eddie thinks SOG fights Bellew next. You never know. I mean, if Bellew wins, then SOG could gain a lot of money from fighting Bellew. Pugilist Specialist says, Hatman, who would be your pick to win a light heavyweight World Boxing Super Series tournament? It depends on the draw. You know, it all depends on the draw. You have to see the draw before you know, because you could have two of the favorites fighting each other in the semis, and you could have a weaker side of the draw on the other side, so it's hard to say. But you'd have to say that Kovalev and Bivol and Beterbiev would be up there, and maybe Stevenson. What if Stevenson gets the good side of the draw, you know, the easier side of the draw, makes it through to the final, and there's an upset along the way, and then you got Stevenson versus some guy who stylistically is tailor-made for him, and Stevenson wins. You just don't know until you see the draw. Salvador Sanchez versus Alexis Arguello. It's a good fight. I would say Sanchez. Arguello was a good fighter. He was a good puncher. His most memorable fights were, well, he had a lot of memorable fights, but the Aaron Pryor was definitely memorable. I remember him knocking out Kevin Rooney. Alexis Arguello. I think it was in the first round. It was early in the fight anyway. He knocked out Kevin Rooney with a right hand. He cleaned him out, boy. That was a wicked knockout. Very good puncher, Arguello. David Brent says, Hatman, what do you think of Bellew's chances versus Usyk / Garcia for the undisputed cruiserweight title? I think he gets beat by both. Yeah, I think he gets beat by both too. Silo Mixing and Mastering says, I'm still on the fence about Ortiz Wilder. I can see both. I can see how both can win, but not really sure about this one. Rashid, I already addressed that about Valero and Sanchez. Oh, you're talking about Valero didn't get... No, Valero did get caught up in the street life. Valero was connected to gangs and, you know, taking drugs and all that kind of stuff. So he was a street guy. You know, yeah, he was drugs and all kind of madness. So yeah, he killed his wife and killed himself. I mean, what did his wife do for him to kill his wife? You know, a lot of these guys who are from South America, they get into certain situations. Like, for example, Arturo Gatti, who's Italian, his wife was from where? Brazil or Colombia or somewhere like that. And he went to that country and he died there. I mean, what kind of person was his wife? You understand what I'm telling you? Like, she weren't just a regular type of woman. This seems like a street woman. TG says, I rate Badou Jack, but he looks small against Cleverly. He didn't look particularly big against Cleverly, to be fair, but Stevenson is not a massive light heavyweight himself. He's coming up from super middleweight. I mean, he only moved up to super middleweight because he couldn't get the Froch fight. Sorry, he only moved up to light heavyweight because he couldn't get the Froch fight at super middleweight. That's the only reason he moved up. Because Chad Dawson offered him a shot, a voluntary, which is crazy. Yeah, crazy. And one play 5 says Wilder is going to Euro step around Ortiz. Bam bam, good night. DW International says David Haye has a better chance against Browne. Michael Steiner says, do you think Stevenson would have beat Froch? Yes, I do. Yes, I do. I think a prime Stevenson beats Carl Froch. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Stevenson's a very good fighter, or at least he was a few years ago. Very good. Very good fighter. Dangerous, good long range boxer. Tremendous puncher. He's a good fighter, Stevenson, but he didn't really deliver on his promise. On the potential that he had, he didn't deliver. He didn't partake in certain fights. To be fair, he ducked Kovalev the first time around to sign a deal with Showtime and Al Heyman, but then he wanted to fight Kovalev a different time, but then it was Team Kovalev who pulled out. So there's blame on both sides. But yeah, Stevenson, I think he would have beaten Carl Froch, definitely. If you consider the fact that Froch lost to people like Mikhail Kessler, even though it was close, he lost to Kessler. He came close to losing to people like Groves, Jermaine Taylor, and Andre Durrell. A lot of people believe he lost to Durrell. When you consider that he's had very close fights or tough fights or losses to these kind of guys, yeah, I think Stevenson would have beat him. And I was saying it at the time when Stevenson was Froch's mandatory. I was saying Stevenson will beat Froch, and I think he would have beat him, particularly at that time. Yeah, a lot of people thought Durrell beat Froch. A lot of people thought he did. Yeah, TG says Stevenson is still good, he just don't care about the fans at all. Yeah, Stevenson gives not a flying you know what about the fans. Stevenson don't care about the fans at all. He's interested in one thing only, and that's his money. Nothing else matters to him. Not interested in what the fans think or what the fans want. He's only interested in money. And one play 5 says, will Lucas Browne be a Dylan Whyte punching bag? that short fat Russian knocked him down. I don't know whether it'll be a Whyte punching bag, but I do see Whyte winning the fight. I think he'll outbox Lucas Browne. And that's another person, by the way, if you watch the interview with Peter Fury, I think it's in this interview, he talks about Whyte versus Lucas Browne in this interview, and he's also saying the same thing that I've been saying, that he thinks Whyte is just going to outbox him. He's going to outbox him, and that's what I see. I think Whyte is just going to outbox Lucas Browne. Beat him on points probably. Might even stop him late depending on where Lucas Browne's fitness levels are at. But I think Whyte will win. Yeah, I'm not saying Browne don't have a chance. He's a tremendous puncher, so he could hurt Dillian Whyte and beat him. So I'm not saying it's beyond possibility at all, but for me that's 60-40 in Whyte's favor in my head. I think so. I think so. Rashid says, why are boxers so crazy compared to most other sportsmen? You got Tony Ayala, Valero, Liston, all crazy. Well, getting punched in the head can have an effect on your behavior. I mean, look what happened to Jermaine Taylor. So getting punched in the head is not really the healthiest thing to be happening. And on top of that, a lot of boxers come from impoverished backgrounds, so they come from very negative environments anyway, where a lot of them are coming from the streets. So you're going to get crazy characters coming into boxing from time to time because a lot of them are coming from crazy environments. Pimp mentality, says Shola. Yeah, that's what Stevenson's got, the pimp mentality. And one play 5 says, I personally don't think Browne can take the same beating Helenius just did. Well, Browne is not as tall as Helenius, and I don't think he's as good at surviving as Helenius, but I think he will be a lot more game than Helenius. I think he'll be more dangerous than Helenius. He'll swing a lot more and he'll try a lot harder, I think. And I think he'll be more dangerous. Helenius, you know, after Helenius had a decent couple early rounds, he just gave up. He said he hurt his hand and he basically just gave up. So I don't think Lucas Browne will do that. I think Browne will try until the bitter end to land a haymaker. And Whyte needs to be careful that he don't get clipped. Max Camilo says, Hatman, can I join your boxing group? I always hear you mention in the boxing group. Yes, on Facebook. Just send a request to Hatman Boxing on Facebook. You can join. Michael Stannis says, do you have any emotional attachment to any fighter? Personally, I just want to see great fights and the best fight the best. I have a soft spot for Groves and Fury, but that's it really. No, I wouldn't say I have an emotional attachment to any fighter because I don't know them personally to have any emotional attachment. There's certain fighters who I enjoy watching and there's certain fighters who I enjoy as characters. So I do like watching them and it makes me happy watching them. So I mean, if you want to call that an emotional attachment, but if they lose, do I really care that much? Like, not really. You know, and I'm certainly not going to be biased. I'll always be objective. So yeah, there are certain fighters I like more than others, but I don't really want to say an emotional attachment because my logic is still very much intact. Like, for example, Shannon Briggs. I like Shannon Briggs. I like the whole Let's Go Champ movement and all that business, but I knew that it was all just for show. I knew it was all WWE. I knew that Shannon Briggs was finished years ago. So I was just taking it for what it was, which was entertainment, the whole Let's Go Champ thing. So yeah, I like Briggs, but I know he ain't gonna beat nobody. You know, he ain't gonna do nothing. Joseph Reyes says, what made you watch and start boxing, Hatman? It was when I was given a VHS tape when I was a kid, a documentary about Muhammad Ali. It was a VHS tape, and that really inspired me to start boxing because I just was amazed by this Muhammad Ali guy. The way that he spoke and his charisma and his fighting style and everything about him, just instantly I was amazed by Ali. This is when I was a child, so it's Ali that really inspired me to want to get into boxing and take an interest in boxing. JD Film says thoughts on Caleb Plant. I've never actually watched him fight. I'll be honest, I've never watched him fight. Obviously I know the name, but I've never watched him fight, to be honest. How many rounds of gas can Browne have? Yeah, Browne has been inactive and he hasn't been fighting at a very high level of late. So you have to imagine that his gas tank might not be the fullest. Would you consider doing more interviews like the O'Hara one? Yes, I will, and yes, I do consider it, and I will be doing more interviews like that. James Erickson says, I thought you liked David Price. Yeah, I do like David Price. I do like watching David Price. Just pure entertainment. Yeah. David Brent says, I think channels like IFL can help you get to know fighters' real personalities so you get a slight attachment to them, not just watching them fight. Yeah, IFL have done a great job in the way they interview fighters because you get to really know who they are. Prior to that, a lot of fighters were very reserved, and if you watch fighters on other platforms where they get interviewed on other platforms, they don't open up as much, so you don't really get to see as much of their personality. But IFL really get in there. Coogan especially does a very good job of getting fighters to open up and reveal their true selves. So yeah, IFL are very good at what they do. Leo O'Brien says, Hatman, do you watch other sports other than boxing? No, I don't. I don't watch anything other than boxing. Simo says, Hatman interview with Khan needed. I'd love to interview Khan. Rashid says, Eubank Jr. looked like he was trying to miss against Groves. Yeah, he did look wilder than Wilder. He was swinging for the fences. I mean, I've never seen Eubank swing like that so wildly, not even against Saunders. So part of that is because of Groves making a miss, and also part of it was emotion. I think Eubank was desperate in there, and we've never seen him desperate before. His composure went out the window the first few times he got hit solidly by George Groves, and then after that he just felt desperation set in, and his technique went out the window, and he started swinging like a novice. So he didn't hold it together mentally at all. Chris Eubank Jr. You know, in boxing, I remember Customado saying, and it's true, you know, many trainers will tell you this, the most important time to stay calm in a boxing ring is when you get hurt. Like, you're supposed to be calm all the time, but a lot of people get hit, they get hurt or buzzed, and they start panicking, and they either go into attack mode or just into a deer in the headlights type of mode. Whereas the smart fighter and the experienced guy is the guy who stays calm in that situation. Mayweather against Mosley, a good example of a guy who stayed calm when he was hurt. Canelo when he fought Miguel Cotto's brother. I remember watching that. I think that was on the Mayweather Mosley undercard when Canelo fought Cotto's brother. And he got hurt in that fight, but he stayed so calm. That's one thing that impressed me, because I wasn't impressed by Canelo in that fight. That was actually the first time I'd seen Canelo. I wasn't impressed by him, but one thing I was impressed by was how calm he was when he got hurt. Eubank Jr. got buzzed by George Groves and he panicked. That's what happened. He panicked and his composure went out the window. Mentally, he's not there yet, and maybe he will never be there. But if he's ever going to be a world champion or succeed at the highest level, at elite level in boxing, he needs to sort his mind out. He needs to sort many things out, but one of the things he needs to sort out is his mind, because you can't be panicking like that the first time you get buzzed. Joseph Reyes says, can you talk about your amateur days and if you fought any notable opponents? I remember you talking about Bellew moving up to cruiserweight because he was a tremendous puncher at heavyweight. You know, I don't like to talk too much about my personal details because, you know, when I start revealing loads of personal things and who I fought and what I did and all this kind of business, then, you know, people are going to be able to put two and two together. But what I can say is that I came up in the amateurs around the same time as David Haye, believe it or not. And I did actually train at the Fitzroy Lodge when David Haye was there for a brief period. And after David Haye left Fitzroy Lodge, because he fell out with the trainer, and I don't know David Haye, by the way, personally or anything like that. I've never known him personally, but you know, while I was there briefly when he was there, and then I went off to go to a different gym, and then after he'd left, or after he'd been kicked out by Mick Carney, I went back a few years later and was there again. And there were several gyms that I trained at. There was a gym which no longer exists called Brixton and District in South London. Another gym which still exists called the Lynn ABC, and there was another gym called Miguel's, which is still around now. So I went to several gyms when I was an amateur, moved around, and yeah, I've been to other gyms around London as well, but those were the main gyms that I was at. And as far as people who I fought, I never reached a particularly high level in the amateurs. I had a lot of potential, so people told me, but I had issues with injuries and just life in general. I was going through a lot of things in my life which made it impossible to train a lot of the time. So I put in a lot of good performances in the gym, but when it came to actually, you know, my fights, my amateur career was very fractured. You know, a lot of fighters who become successful, they're active in the amateurs, you know, but there's a lot of politics in amateur boxing, and as I say, you can get injured and all kind of things can happen to you. So my career as an amateur it spanned over many years, from the age of 12 through to my mid-20s, but I didn't have that many fights, you know, relative to the time I've been fighting, you know. So I only had 30 odd fights, but I'd been fighting for, you know, well over 10 years. So yeah, it was a fractured career, stop-start amateur boxing career, where I felt like I never really got to fulfill my potential, but you know, it is what it is. Shola says Fitzroy Lodge, some great fighters in there, and of course Miguel's and Lynn. Yeah, I've heard that Fitzroy Lodge has kind of gone downhill over the past few years. I don't know, I haven't been there for many years, but I've heard it's kind of gone downhill since Mick passed away. There was Mick and there was Bill, who were good friends. They actually fought when they were amateurs, Mick and Bill. And I remember, I think Bill died first. Did Bill die before Mick? I can't remember now. But they both died around the same time. Like there wasn't much of a gap between when the two of them died. And since both those guys died, from what I'm told, the place has kind of gone downhill. And I believe Fitzroy Lodge, correct me if I'm wrong, have lost their lottery funding. But I used to like Bill, especially the old guy in there called Bill. Um, yeah, I used to like Bill. Simo says, I can confirm Hatman hit harder than McClellan in his prime. Well, I was a hell of a lot bigger than McClellan. A hell of a lot bigger. I weighed more than McClellan when I was about 12. James Erickson says, how do you determine who's pound for pound number one? No fighter is invincible. Is it skills, resume, or legacy? I don't really get into pound for pound too much, to be honest. I let other people debate that. D Pog says, oh, it's you. I remember you now. Makes sense. You were always quiet and always had a hat at the gym. You sussed me out. uh, I was actually quite, well, it depends which gym, but I was actually quite loud in the gym, to be fair. Um, Mr. Captain Hook, big up. Nathan Sterling says, Hatman, did you rate Joe Calzaghe as a boxer? Yes, I did. Simo A comeback says, oh, I remember you, Deepog. You were the cleaner. Banter. Hatman, I can relate, says Max Camillo. I've been boxing for almost 10 years, but I haven't been able to fight because of injuries. 3 shoulder operations, now 25 and trying to fulfill my dreams. Is it too late? I mean, you never know unless you try, Max. So you gotta try and see. That's all I can tell you, because rules and things like that are meant to be broken. So when they say that you're too old to do something, try it and see. Maybe you're not too old. Maybe you'll be the person who breaks that mold. You gotta try. Big up Captain Hook, says he's loving the content. Thank you for locking in. Glad you're enjoying it. And my brother, actually, I got a younger brother who used to box, and he never actually had an amateur fight because of the same situation. He had a back injury, a chronic back injury. He sparred loads of, thousands of rounds in the gym, and he was way more talented than I was. And everyone who saw him or sparred with him, they were saying, this boy's got something, he's special. But because of this chronic back injury, he never even ended up having an amateur fight. There was a few occasions where he was supposed to fight, but the opponent pulled out, because that happens a lot in amateur boxing. A lot of people might not realize that in amateur boxing, fights get cancelled on a regular basis. Opponents pull out and all types of stuff goes on. So yeah, that's the same for my brother. Never ended up having an amateur fight. Even though he'd been boxing for years and sparring in the gym and training for years and years, he never actually got to have a fight. Anthony McKen says, set realistic goals with amateur boxing. I started competing at 28 and my 40th birthday is this year. Yeah, well, the age limit for amateur boxing is 40 now, isn't it? So if you're under 40, get out there and have a fight and see how it goes. Try and just see. Let's try and see. Tayo Vraz says, Hatman, why did you delete your songs from the channel? They were good. I deleted them because YouTube got all militant and overzealous on flagging videos that they deemed inappropriate content, and they flagged all my music videos. They flagged all my bouncer videos. They flagged all my topical videos, and basically it was getting to the stage where my channel was almost going to be blacklisted. So I removed all the stuff that YouTube took offense to. So that's the reason why they're no longer up. Yes, big up 10, you out. Thank you for locking in. Sergio Martinez was 21 or 22 when he took up the sport. Michael Stenner says, if you could pick one punch from each fighter to create your ultimate fighter, what would you choose? Example like Ward left hook, triple G, jab. Fighters right now, depends. If it's a southpaw fighter, definitely Stevenson's left hand. Lomachenko's movement and work rate. And yeah, probably that's it as a southpaw. Orthodox, Wilder's right hand. Andre Ward's defensive technique and inside game. And Triple G's chin. And I know he's just retired, but Klitschko's jab. Omo Jr. says, Hatman, love the content. Would you ever consider doing a meet and greet with your Patreon members someday? Maybe some members, yeah. I don't know about meet and greet, because I don't really put myself up on a pedestal as any type of celebrity. Like meet and greet makes it sound like I'm some kind of celebrity. I'm just a normal guy like you. So I don't really see myself as some internet celebrity that needs to be meeting and greeting and doing book signings and stuff like that. But yeah, You know, I definitely connect with certain people because I'm a very private person, because that's one of the reasons I don't go on camera no more, because I'm a private person. You know, so I'm not somebody who wants to be walking around and having people walk up to me every 5 minutes and, oh, you're Hatman from YouTube and can I take a selfie? And I'm not into all that. You know, I've always, all my life, I've always been a private kind of person. You understand? And even the whole time I was on the internet, the only time that I ever appeared on camera anywhere was when I first started my YouTube. But when I was on other websites, on MySpace and all these, I would never put my pictures up. I would never do nothing like that because I always just feel that I want to keep my privacy, you know. Joseph Reyes says, Hatman, I'm 6'2", 83-inch reach, southpaw, weighed 140 for a while. I've had to cancel my amateur fights 4 times and been docked several times, and now 155. Do you think I can get an opponent now? You're 6'2" and you're 155 with a very long reach. Well, I'm not surprised you can't get an opponent because you're very big for the weight. Very big for the weight. But hopefully you can. I mean, I don't know what the situation is like, what kind of you know, gym or club you're boxing for, how easy, how good their matchmakers are, I don't know. But I wish you all the best, and you know, with that kind of height, if you got the right technique, you should be able to definitely win some fights. Sven Otkar, what are your thoughts? He was a guy who never boxed outside of Germany and who had some very dubious decisions, but at the same time he was a smart boxer. I never rated him particularly highly, but yeah, he was a smart boxer. He took on a lot of guys who were over the hill and what have you, and had a lot of favorable decisions go his way, but he also had some decent legit wins. So those are my thoughts on Sven Otkar. He was just over there in Germany doing his thing, and the rest of the boxing world didn't really take him that seriously, to be honest. Joseph Reyes says, well, I'm still growing, brother. Nathan Sterling says, Hatman, I remember you were cussing on your video, setting the record straight. Yeah, I think Calzaghe would have beaten Otkar. I think so. Joseph Reyes says, in Puerto Rico, your trainer has to find an opponent from another gym, so they ask, what's your kid like? They give my description, and they go to your gym to check you out. And I guess you're just too big for you know, especially when you're dealing with inexperienced fighters. They have to get somebody with your level of experience. And most people in your weight class, you know, 155 pounds, 150, they're not going to be anywhere near as tall as you. So if you're dealing with an inexperienced kid and you're looking for an opponent, you don't really want to match him with someone who's, you know, when he's like 5'8" and you're 6'2", and your guy's on inexperienced, you don't really want to match him with someone that big. So I can understand why you're finding it difficult maybe to get an opponent. Yeah, Jamie Moore versus Macklin. It's crazy the way Jamie Moore beat Macklin and then ended up training him. Yeah. Johnny Lappert says Robin Deacon versus David Price. uh, Alright, let me scroll up here. So somebody said David Brent says Fury has a better jab than Klitschko and he can do it as a lefty as well. I disagree. I don't think Fury has a better jab than Klitschko. It's a different kind of jab than Klitschko, but I say Klitschko's jab is a better jab. Klitschko's jab was extremely powerful, very accurate. There was very little tell on the jab. A tremendous jab, one of the greatest jabs of all time. Fury's jab is a good jab, and he can jab from the southpaw stance as well, but I wouldn't necessarily say it's better than Klitschko's. You know, I'm not saying it's worse either. I'm just saying I wouldn't necessarily say it's better. He has very long arms. That's why I can say his reach is obviously better than Klitschko's. He's got a ridiculous reach. Fury is like 85 or 86-inch reach. It's crazy reach. And when you've got that kind of reach, you're going to be effective if you know how to use it. But it doesn't necessarily mean your jab is better than Klitschko's. It just means you got a longer reach and you keep the arms out there. But Vladimir's jab was a tremendous, tremendous jab. Very powerful. And very accurate. Yeah, Kovalev's got a very good jab too. Very good jab. Checkmate 734 says, what do you think, who would win between Prime Klitschko and Joshua? I think the Joshua now versus a Prime Klitschko, and this is going to be controversial, and I know it is counterintuitive, but I don't think Klitschko was very far off his best when he fought Joshua. In terms of his sharpness, his movement, he came in like 240 pounds. I know he was old, but I don't think he was that far off his best that night. That's just my opinion, based upon his movement and speed and his balance, and everything about him just seemed on point that night. I can't say he was definitely at his best. He was probably at his best a few years earlier, but yeah, I don't think he was too far off it from what I saw with my eyes. So I give Joshua a decent chance against any version of Klitschko, but Klitschko came so close to beating Joshua in that fight. In the early rounds, to me, Klitschko was winning it. You know, Klitschko looked on the route to winning the fight up until Joshua came and put him down in the fifth. You know, when Joshua took the bull by the horns and said, you know what, I can't outbox this guy, I just have to take it to him. And when he took it to him, he had him on the floor very quickly. But when it was a boxing match, to me, Klitschko was bossing the fight. And I was amazed that the judges actually had Joshua ahead, or they had it level or something like that at the time of the stoppage. I thought Klitschko was ahead going into that 11th. On my card, I had him ahead. So Nathan Sterling says, Hatman, who do you think would have won between Ward and Calzaghe? A tough, close fight. I would say Ward just, but you know, I think it could go either way. I rate Calzaghe highly. I think he's good. Silo Mixing and Mastering says, I think Haye fought Prime Klitschko with Manny as trainer. Joshua fought a very good version of Klitschko. Yeah, maybe so. Maybe it was Haye who really fought the Prime Klitschko. Michael Stanner says, thoughts on Vlad's chin. I don't think it was as bad as people make out. He took some bombs off Joshua. Well, part of taking a punch is mental. A lot of it is mental. And Klitschko, by the time he fought Joshua, was mentally stronger than at any point he'd been in his career up until then. That's what I'll tell you. He may not have been at his absolute peak physically, but mentally, I don't think there's ever been a stronger version of Klitschko than the one we saw against Joshua. I think that was him at his absolute mental strongest, and because of that, he was able to take the punches better. When you see Klitschko against Sam Peter, go look at the shots that put him down. They were not particularly good shots, but mentally, he just wasn't prepared to take the kind of punches he took against Joshua. So he went down a lot easier against somebody like Sam Peter, and panicked a lot more as well. So a lot of it is getting used to taking the punches, and how confident you are in taking the punches, how relaxed you feel in the ring. All these things can play a part in terms of how well you absorb shots. So I don't think Klitschko's chin was that bad in the end, but I think in a way his punch resistance improved the more confident he got later on into his career, because he was used to taking the shots, and also he was more confident in himself. Because he used to really panic when he would get hit before, like really panic. DW International says Tyson Fury beats both Klitschko and Joshua. Well, we know he beats Klitschko because he beat him. We need to see how he does against Joshua. The version, if Joshua versus Fury ever happens, you have to imagine that Fury is going to be fighting a better version of Joshua than the one who fought Klitschko, because Joshua is still improving, and he will learn a lot from the Klitschko fight. Ali Malek says, how would you see Groves versus Billy Joe if it ever happened? Be a very, very interesting fight. Very interesting. I can see Billy Joe giving Groves problems. I would edge towards Groves, and that would be a very, very high level chess match. Groves against Billy Joe. I would edge towards Groves because he does have the reach on Billy Joe. And when you've got the reach and you decide to box on the back foot, you basically force the smaller guy to come at you and make the fight. And I know Billy Joe fought Andy Lee and whatnot, and he was successful against Andy Lee, who's taller and rangier than Groves, but I don't think Andy Lee has the speed that Groves has. And I just don't think Andy Lee is as good at long range in general as Groves is, despite the fact he's bigger and taller. So I would edge towards Groves, but I think it would be a very, very high level chess match. But it will come down to tactics. Groves, see, some people think Groves would have to impose himself on Billy Joe, whereas I think the opposite. I think Groves should just use his reach and stay away from Billy Joe. Force Billy Joe to come towards him, because both guys like to box. Yeah, so make Billy Joe come forward and do what he doesn't naturally like to do, which is come forward and attack. And he can do that just by sitting back. Afshin says Prime Klitschko brothers beat Joshua easy. I don't personally think so. I don't personally think so. Vladimir Klitschko lost to Ross Purity. He lost to Lamont Brewster. He lost to Corey Saunders. He had a very tough fight first time around with Sam Peter. And then he went on a 10-year winning streak where he was fighting mostly short, fat guys with not much talent, or old guys. He did beat David Haye, but again, David Haye is not the size of a Joshua. You know, he did beat people like Marius Wack and what have you, but again, these are guys who don't have the talent that Joshua had. So I don't see Klitschko, any version of Klitschko, having an easy time with Joshua, personally. That's just my view. But with the older Klitschko, different story with Vitali. But Vladimir, he's always got that vulnerability about him where I think Joshua would always give him issues. Joseph Reyes says, Hatman, if you could describe your boxing style, what fighter does it resemble? If I had to name a fighter, I'd say I'm a bit like a southpaw Lennox Lewis, Danny Jacobs. That's a good question. That's a good question, because when I was fighting as an amateur, I just relied on my strength and power, because I really didn't know how to box. I was just a guy who could hit very hard and had quick hands, and I could take a shot, so I would just go forward and attack you because I knocked a lot of people out in the gym, and I just took that into the ring. And there are not many amateur coaches, to be honest with you, who I really believed in. I'll say that. And so, you know, they would tell me certain things, but I would think, nah, that don't really work, or this, that, and the other. So it's only after the last amateur fight I had when I really started learning how to box, and I did most of my best boxing in the gym. I never actually managed to do my best stuff in an actual fight because I was getting injured and all kinds of issues after I had my last amateur fight. So when I was actually fighting, I was just a come forward slugger. But after that is when I really learned how to box, and I got much better, you know, in the years when I was still sparring and training. And stylistically, I would say, how would I describe my style? Um, funny enough, I would say that I had to be adaptable because, I'm not particularly tall for my weight and I'm not particularly short for my weight. So I had to be someone that could do a bit of both because there were going to be plenty of guys taller than me and plenty of guys shorter than me. So I was able to change up my style. But when I'm fighting someone around the same height as me, I like to snipe. I like to do orthodox version of Adonis Stevenson. But with a more powerful jab, with a more consistent jab. But I liked the straight right hand down the pipe. That was a shot that I developed into a very, very good punch. So the straight right hand down the pipe, sniping, moving around, trying to not get into too many exchanges and waiting for the opportunity. Controlling it with a jab and waiting for the opportunity to shoot the right hand down the pipe. So I would say, kind of like a bit like Stevenson, because Stevenson, unlike somebody like George Groves, Stevenson can actually fight inside. Yeah, Groves can't fight inside. He's not very good inside. Stevenson actually is quite good inside. He just chooses not to. But if you go watch Stevenson, especially in his pre-Manny Stewart fights, and even if you watch Stevenson against Fonfara, or watch Stevenson against Thomas Williams Jr., he can fight inside, He just chooses not to most of the time because it gives his opponents opportunities. But when he decides, okay, let's fight inside, he can do it. So I had that ability. I could fight inside, but I would just try and keep, if I'm fighting somebody around the same height as me, I try and keep it on the outside and land the right hand. Max says Hatman is Eubank Jr.'s career finished. Depends how much desire he has, and it depends how smart he is. Because if he hooks up with a proper trainer and he starts putting certain things into practice technically and comes with the right approach mentally, then I don't think he's finished. It's like Eddie Hearn has been saying, Eubank Jr. is basically self-trained. And to be able to go 12 rounds with George Groves when you're self-trained, that means you've got something about you. So imagine how good he can be if he's actually got a proper trainer and he listens to the trainer and he's actually taught properly. Yeah, shout out to Nicholas. What's happening? He says, just woke up and you're having a podcast and my sleep is now second best. Big up. Man, how good is... See, some of these names I struggle to pronounce, so you'll have to forgive me. I'm not even sure who that is. Afshin, the guy who you're mentioning, I'm not even sure who that is, I'll be honest. Mr. Alvo says, what weight do you think Joshua will come in at? I really don't know. I really don't know. I would hope he comes in no higher than 245 or 246. Recently, he was on Instagram or Twitter and he weighed 248 or just under 249. Just under 249. But that after a long session? I mean, we don't know. Oh, the guy Jacobs is fighting. Yeah, I've heard the guy's dangerous. But I've never watched him fight. I have to be honest. I've never seen the guy who Jacobs is fighting. Never watched him. But I've heard people are saying he's dangerous. A lot of people are saying this. So I'm definitely going to check him out before watching the Jacobs fight, and obviously before doing a prediction. So yeah, I'm definitely going to have a look at this guy. Because people are saying Jacobs is in for a tough night. DW International says, Hatman, you sound like an Errol Spence. When I was fighting, I kind of had a similar type of approach, but I was more explosive than Spence. One thing I can say, I'm not somebody who will come on here and bullshit you and, act as though I was this, that, and the other. I can just tell you the truth about me as a fighter. I had fast hands and I could punch and I was explosive. Errol Spence is not really explosive. Errol Spence is kind of like a methodical fighter. I was more explosive. Like when I punch, it's a hard punch and it's fast, and it will come out of nowhere. Spence is more of like a Marvin Hagler, a guy who's strong, technically good, maintains his shape, and throws, thudding, consistent punches. That's more Spence. Whereas I was more of a guy who was sporadic. I wouldn't work constantly the way Spence works. I would fight in spurts and throw heavy lever, fast, explosive punches in bursts, and then get back on the jab or do whatever I had to do to get a little rest and then go again. That was more my pattern. Even when I was just a slugger, that's what I would do. I would slug and I would try and find a way to take a little rest and then open up with another fast, explosive burst of punches. Cass says Hagler was much smoother than Spence. Yeah, Hagler was smoother. He was smoother, but their basic approach is similar. Neither one of them is particularly fast. Neither one of them is particularly... I mean, they're both good punchers, but they're not crazy powerful or anything like that. And they both chip away at you rather than just blast you out. And they're both very strong mentally, Hagler and Spence. You look at the difference between Spence's mindset and Eubank Jr.'s mindset. When Spence, in them early rounds, was getting tagged by Kell Brook and outboxed away from home, you didn't see Spence panicking. You didn't see Spence getting off his game plan. He stayed on his game plan and he did what he had to do. The Boxing Roundup says, have you checked out Asiena Byfield yet? British super welterweight? No, I haven't. Okay. Kyla says, what's your reaction to David Haye's newfound approach towards the Bellew fight? Well, he has to have a new approach mentally, because what he did last time didn't work. So this time he's like, okay, let me just humble myself, go back to basics, and let Bellew do all the trash talking. Because then he's going to be winding himself up and I'm going to be calm. Because he came out in the first fight, David Haye, angry, looking to bomb Bellew out. And now he's thinking, no, I need to be happy, I need to be calm. Because that's the mindset I've been in when I've produced all my best performances. So that's what he said in the press conference, and I can see the logic behind it. So yeah, that's what I think of it. I think, well, he has to try it because he lost first time around. So Joseph Reyes says, what do you think of the Puerto Rican boxing style? Well, that's the thing about Puerto Rico. I don't think they have a specific boxing style, because all the Puerto Ricans that I've watched over the years, their styles are very different, you know. Hector Camacho had a totally different style to Miguel Cotto. Miguel Cotto has a totally different style to Tito Trinidad, so on and so forth. So yeah, Puerto Rico is obviously a very strong country when it comes to boxing, but they don't have a specific style, a style that Puerto Ricans are known for. It's not like with Mexicans, because the vast majority of Mexican fighters are pressure fighters. They go forward and they attack. That's how the vast majority of them fight. So you can say that that is the Mexican style, because most Mexicans fight that way. There are some exceptions. Canelo don't fight that way, and there are a few other Mexicans who don't, but most of them do fight that way. But with Puerto Rico, there doesn't really seem to be a particular style. Kind of like British fighters now. Back in the days, you could say there was a British style, but now you see so many different styles in the UK. You see the David Haye Grove style. You got Joshua, that type of style. The Kell Brook style with Brendan Ingle and all that. So with Dominic Ingle and whatnot, you got Billy Joe Saunders. There are so many different styles. Tyson Fury. So Britain doesn't really have a style anymore, and I'd say it's similar to Puerto Rico in that sense, that there isn't really a style, so to speak, that you could put your finger on and say, okay, this is the British style, or this is the Puerto Rican style. The Boxing Roundup says, what pay-per-views you paid for lately? Do you buy them all, or just the ones you deem worthy? I only buy the ones I deem worthy. I paid for the Groves Eubank pay-per-view. I paid for the Joshua Klitschko last year. And obviously it depends on where you are in the world, because it's not always possible from, you know, where I am to buy every pay-per-view. So David Ross says, Dylan Whyte is the prototypical British style. What is the prototypical British style? I mean, the British domestic style, right, is, I would say, the Joe Gallagher style. You know, the style that Joe Gallagher uh, teaches his fighters? I would say that's the if there is a prototypical British style, it mainly exists at domestic level. Even though, you know, many Gallagher fighters have been up to world level, but yeah, the Crawler style is the domestic style. That to me is like the British domestic style is like Crawler, all the Gallagher guys and all that business. Yeah, the Gallagher style. Yeah, Quick has the style too. That's the Gallagher style is the British domestic style. Joseph Reyes says, we have a certain baseline that we follow. I'd say we follow the boxer puncher route. We mix the black Cuban Mexican style together. Yeah, I can see that. I mean, I don't know what happened to him. Actually, no, I was gonna mention somebody who's not even Puerto Rican, is actually Cuban. I was gonna mention Richard Abreu, but Richard Abreu is Cuban, so forget what I was gonna say about him. Max Camilo says, Hatman, how many fights does an amateur super heavyweight need to become pro? After how many fights do you think you gain experience as an amateur? Well, different people learn at different speeds, so I can't really say. Some fighters don't need that many fights. Some fighters need a lot more. Mike Tyson only had about, what, 30 something amateur fights? Then he turned pro. Klitschko had a hell of a lot more than that. Both Klitschkos. Lennox Lewis had nearly 100 amateur fights. Joshua, I think maybe only had around 40 or something like that. 30, 40 fights, Joshua. So it depends on the fighter. It depends on the era they're fighting in. Depends on their physical attributes. Depends on how quickly they learn. You know. But you can turn professional in the UK after only having a handful of amateur fights. I mean, you can have no amateur fights and they'll give you a license if they think you're competent. The British board make you box or spar with with a pro, and they watch you while you spar to see whether you're competent, and based upon that they'll give you a license even if you don't have any amateur fights. So, and in the United States, in certain states, it's very easy, maybe too easy, to get a boxing license. In some of them southern states, I mean, just look at the state of some of Deontay Wilder's early opponents. None of them belonged in a boxing ring, but yet they got licensed. Shola says there used to be a Lonsdale style of boxing here in the UK. It's now obsolete. Joseph Reyes says, look at Ivan Calderon in contrast to Miguel Cotto. Cotto mixes it up, Cuban style with a Mexican style, whereas Calderon fights exactly like a Cuban. Indeed, yeah. As I say, that's the thing with Puerto Rico. They mix it up and they have lots of different styles. B says, how often can amateurs fight? Well, if they're in a tournament or something like that, they can fight like every other day or every day, depending on how the tournament is set up. But if they're just boxing on different type of shows and whatnot, it varies. It depends how easy it is to get them opponents, and It really varies. Sometimes amateurs can be fighting every couple of weeks, even outside of tournaments. Yeah, what's good, big bro? What's good? Yeah, that is also true. Tenpin says most Mexicans don't have many amateur fights. They just learn in the pros beating up cab drivers. Yeah, that's the process that they have in Mexico. Is they're not really big on amateur boxing. They turn pro when they're like 14 years old, 14, 15, and they beat up a bunch of cab drivers, and that's how they learn their craft, sparring and beating up cab drivers from when they're teenagers. Yeah, a lot of them, a lot of the best Mexican fighters of all time hardly had any amateur fights. Some of them had no amateur fights at all. I'm pretty sure there's footage of Canelo in some of his early amateur fights where he's beating up cab drivers. Or sorry, his early professional fights where he's beating up cab drivers. I think Canelo turned pro at what age? What, 16 or something like that? Joseph Reyes says, I'm sorry for prying on the subject, but do you think Wilfred Benitez and Wilfredo Gomez are underrated? Um, I mean, a lot of people are underrated now because these are fighters from way back in the days. So a lot of them are underrated now, I would say. Wilfred Benitez, for what he achieved, you know, becoming the youngest world champion of all time, and that's never been, that record hasn't been broken, right? So you have to give him a lot of credit for that. And also, Benitez was around in a time when there were some of the greatest fighters of all time, you know, with the Sugar Ray Leonards and the Tommy Hearns and Duran and all these kind of people. So yeah, you could say Benitez was underrated because of the fact that he was around so many all-time greats who were in their prime when he was boxing. If he was around today in that weight division, he'd probably be getting a lot more credit. David Brent says, interesting fact, Fury had a 90% amateur KO record where everyone wears huge gloves, headgear. Joshua didn't even have 50%. So it's a myth. Fury has no power. It's just he breaks you down slowly. Well, Fury didn't fight at the level that Joshua fought in the amateurs. Um, um, I suspect if Joshua had fought the kind of level that Fury was fighting in the amateurs, Joshua would have had a higher KO ratio than he actually had. Because Joshua was thrown in with very little experience against the world's top amateurs. You know, when he went to the World Games in Azerbaijan and he was taking on people like Camarel and all them kind of guys that he fought in the World Games to get to the final. These were the top guys. Fury wasn't boxing on that level in the amateurs. And obviously in the Olympics. And yeah, people say that Joshua lost at least one of his fights in the Olympics, but again, the point is, look at the level he was fighting at. Fury wasn't fighting at that level in the amateurs. And Fury says it was politics, but still, whether it's politics or not, he wasn't fighting at that level, and that's one of the reasons that Joshua wasn't getting so many KOs, because he's fighting at a very high level. Jeremiah George says, Hatman, how do you think Whyte will perform against Wilder? Whyte is not fighting Wilder, but if he does fight Wilder, I expect Wilder to knock him out. Cass says, did Brendan Ingle employ the same style that his gym is known for today? No. Brendan Ingle, well, really, it was really Harold Graham that had a particular style which he developed in the Ingle gym, and many of the other Ingle fighters started copying Harold Graham, most notably Prince Nassim. He started copying Harold Graham's style, and he was really the most successful with Harold Graham's style, and that style then became the Ingle style because Johnny Nelson and Ryan Rhodes and Pele Reed and all these different fighters started copying this style, which was really started by Harold Graham, and that became known as the Ingle style. But today you don't really see the Ingle guys fight like that no more. Today they're a lot more conventional. than they were during the Brendan Ingle days. Much more conventional. Brooke is far more conventional. Um, all the guys in there, Kid Galahad, all these guys are far more conventional than the likes of Johnny Nelson or Prince Nassim or Junior Witter and those guys. The Boxing Roundup says, how much do you enjoy watching fights below lightweight? Not as much as I enjoy watching the heavier guys, but there are still some guys I like watching. I like watching Lomachenko. I like watching Gary Russell when he does flipping fight, because he hardly ever fights. I quite like watching Frampton, to be fair. I do quite like watching Frampton. See, the thing for me is I like punchers. I like guys who can punch and can clean people out. And the lower you go in weight, I know it's all relative to size, but you don't tend to get as many punches in the lower weight divisions as you do in the higher weight divisions. So, but there are still some guys I like, you know. Joseph Reyes says, who are your favorite comedians and musicians? Big up Tom, by the way. Big up Tom. Comedians and musicians. Eddie Murphy, when he used to do stand-up way back in the 80s, I used to like Eddie Murphy, and I used to like Eddie Murphy's old school movies like Boomerang and Trading Places and Coming to America. So old school Eddie Murphy was one of my favorite comedians. Dave Chappelle, not so much now, but Dave Chappelle when he was in his prime, at his peak, I used to like Dave Chappelle. You know, Chris Rock, he's okay. He's okay. I've never been a massive Chris Rock fan. I like him, but I've never been, you know, that big a fan of his. And then there's other guys like George Carlin. I like George Carlin because that was more like political comedy and whatnot. And there's like comedians as in comedy actors, and there's also stand-up comedians. Comedy actors, I liked, actually, you know, there's somebody here calling themselves David Brent. I liked Ricky Gervais as an actor, as a comedy actor. When he was in The Office, I thought he was hilarious. I thought Ricky Gervais was hilarious as a comedy actor. And the old Ben Stiller films I used to like as well. Ben Stiller. As far as musicians, man, there are so many musicians I like. So many musicians. A lot of reggae, old school 90s hip hop. All kind of musicians. All kind of musicians. I'll be here all day talking about what musicians I like. But I like Beres Hammond. I like Bob Marley. I like Garnet Silk. I like Barrington Levy in terms of reggae guys. Bounty Killer. Sizzler. Buju Banton. Rappers, you know, I used to like Wu-Tang and Mobb Deep and all kind of different people from back in the days. Raphael Smith says, do you think it's weird that we never see the Cuban fighters like Rigo, Lara, Ortiz and Gamboa with each other hanging out or kicking it? They even think they even like each other? I'm pretty sure they do hang out because a lot of them live in Miami. So I'm pretty sure they do hang out in Miami. We just don't see it because I guess we're not really following them like that. But I believe they do. A lot of them do hang out with each other. The ones who live in close proximity. Aaron says, Hatman, I've been reading a book on the Four Kings. Give me your rundown on Hearns on Leonard at 147. Hearns, I think, won the rematch. Was unlucky not to get the decision, but he was close. The first fight, obviously, Leonard won at 147. And it was really Leonard being able to adapt because he was losing that fight too. But he managed to switch it around in, what was it, the 13th or 14th round? And take Hearns out. And nobody ever outboxed Tommy Hearns. That's one thing I always tell people. Nobody ever outboxed Tommy Hearns. Not even Leonard could outbox him because he had a ridiculous height and reach, and he knew how to use his height and reach well, and he was powerful. So when the guy is like 6'1", 6'2", and you're 5'10" or shorter, and you're a welterweight, how the hell do you get close to Tommy Hearns? The guy's hits ridiculously hard. He's fast. He's got a good jab. He's a good body puncher. Like, it's a nightmare even getting close to the guy. So nobody ever outboxed Hearns. The people who beat him managed to either out hustle him and bully him or knock him out. But nobody really outboxed Hearns. Not even Leonard. Okay. Akuman's Deception says, am I the only one who thinks that Furman is too fast for Spence? No, I think there's quite a few people that think Furman is too fast for Spence. And he definitely is faster than Spence. It's a hell of a fight. It's a hell of a fight, but I do wonder about Furman because injuries and the fact that he's so vulnerable to the body and the fact that Spence is very good to the body. So I think it'll be a hell of a fight, a back and forth fight. You can see Furman maybe pulling away to an early lead. And Furman's got good legs, man. He can move for 12 rounds. We've seen him do it many times. Would Spence get to him though? Would the body attack get to him? He's never faced somebody with as good a body attack as Spence. And remember when Collazo hit Furman in the body? He nearly snapped him in half. And even Sean Porter managed to hurt Furman to the body. So that's the vulnerability about Furman, is that body. He don't like it in the body. So I think it's a hell of a fight. It's a hell of a fight. I could definitely see Furman winning, but I could also see Spence winning. I hope it happens. Anyway, peeps, I'm going to bring this live stream to a close. Thank you guys all for locking in. And yeah, I'll catch you on the next one, people. So apologies to anyone who I didn't manage to answer their questions, because there was quite a few comments. So yeah, big up everyone for locking in. I'm out.